My sister got flowers for a breakup, I got silence for cancer, then my mom said I was overreacting and making it all about me. Hi everyone, before we start today's video I need your help, and subscribing and liking is one of the best ways to help us. It's fast, free and allows us to keep bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel evolving collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's start the video. I'm a 26-year-old man, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the invisible one in my family, the quiet one who didn't ask for much, who kept his head down, who never caused drama, and yet I was the one constantly overlooked, while my sister, on the other hand, was the shining star, the favorite, the one whose every minor inconvenience turned into a full-blown crisis that everyone had to stop and cater to. And growing up in that kind of dynamic slowly drains you, because no matter what I did, no matter how much I suffered in silence, she was always the one who got the attention, the support, the sympathy. On her worst days, she had people checking in on her, comforting her, asking what they could do to help, while on my worst days, I was expected to deal with it quietly, to be strong, to not be a burden, and at some point, I convinced myself that maybe that's just who I was meant to be, the one who held everything together in the background, the one who kept going while no one noticed how broken he really was. I got married at 22, thinking I had finally found someone who truly saw me, someone who wouldn't ignore my pain, someone who would make me feel like I mattered, and for a while, that illusion held me together, until the cracks started showing, until she began to pull away, until the love felt more like obligation, and right when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I got the diagnosis that shattered everything: stage 3 cancer. Aggressive, relentless, a storm I wasn't ready for. I told my parents because I thought that maybe this time they'd show up for me the way they always did for her. I thought that maybe this was serious enough to finally make them care, so I sat them down, voice shaking, hands cold, trying to explain the fear, the hospital visits, the weight of it all, and they said they were sorry. They nodded, they looked concerned for a moment, and I tried so hard to believe it meant something. But 2 days later, my phone buzzed, and it was my mom crying on the other end, not because of me, not because of the disease eating me from the inside out, but because my sister had just broken up with her boyfriend again. That phone call broke something inside me. I just sat there listening to my mother sobbing over my sister's newest breakup, and all I could do was stare at the wall, thinking about how I had told them I was sick, not with a cold, not with something temporary, but with cancer, stage 3, the kind that eats you slowly and leaves you wondering every day if you're going to see the next. And somehow, that didn't even matter because my sister was sad again, and that was obviously more important. I didn't ask for much, I never did. I never wanted them to drop everything. Just once I wished they would ask how I was doing, how I was feeling, if I needed someone to drive me to the clinic, or maybe just offer to sit with me through the first treatment. But instead, the silence around me grew louder, and the space between me and my family felt like a canyon no one wanted to cross. The first chemo session came faster than I expected, and I remember walking into that hospital alone, heart racing, stomach sick, surrounded by strangers who all had someone beside them, holding their hand, whispering that everything would be okay, and I just smiled at the nurse and said I was fine, because that's what I always said, even when I wasn't, even when I was terrified of what would happen next. The treatment hit me like a truck. It drained every bit of energy I had left me curled up in bed for hours feeling like my body wasn't mine anymore. The pain wasn't sharp, it was heavy, slow, it sat on my chest and made everything harder: breathing, eating, even thinking, and I laid there in that silence, hoping the phone would ring, hoping someone would care enough to check on me. It never did. The phone stayed cold, dark, silent, and later that night when I finally opened my eyes again, I saw a notification pop up from my sister's Instagram story. She was out dancing, smiling, posing with her friends like nothing in the world could ever go wrong in her perfect little life, and I just stared at the screen with the taste of chemo still burning in my throat, wondering how people so close to you can be so blind to your pain. The days blurred together after that first round of treatment, and I tried to keep my mind busy, tried to keep moving even when my body didn't want to. I forced myself to go outside, to walk a little, to eat even when nothing tasted like food anymore, and still no one called, no one visited, and for some reason, that hurt more than the illness itself, because I wasn't just battling cancer. I was battling the loneliness that came with it, and every day it became clearer that the people I thought would be there for me were already gone. They just hadn't left the house yet. Eventually I sent a message to my mom, something simple like hey, just wanted to update you, treatment started, I'm managing, hope you're well, and she replied a day later with a short text about how stressful things have been with my sister lately and how they were just trying to keep her spirits up because she's been really emotional, and I read that message 3 times trying to convince myself I had imagined it, trying to believe maybe she meant something more than what she said, but deep down I knew that to them, I was inconvenient, a problem they didn't want to admit existed. They didn't offer to stop by, didn't ask about side effects, didn't even say they were proud of me for being strong, and I didn't expect flowers or some dramatic gesture. I just wanted to hear my mother's voice say she loved me without rushing to tell me what was happening with my sister. I just wanted my father to show me even a fraction of the support he always gave her, but instead they stayed silent, distant, and when they did speak it was always about how things were hard for them too and how I needed to be understanding because not everything is about me. I wanted to scream, not from the pain in my bones but from the pain of being treated like an afterthought, like my illness was something they had to tolerate instead of something they could stand beside me through, and it became clear to me that the love I had been holding onto was one-sided, and that hurt more than anything chemo could ever do to me. At some point I decided I couldn't carry this weight alone anymore and I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached out to my sister, not to argue, not to blame, just to talk, just to maybe feel like someone in my family actually saw me, and I sent her a message telling her what was going on, not in detail, just the basics, that I had cancer, that treatment had started, that it was hard, and after almost 2 hours she finally replied with 4 words, "You'll get through it." I stared at that message for a long time, not because I expected her to drop everything and rush to my side, but because I couldn't believe that was all she had to say. No questions, no "how are you really doing," no "is there anything I can do," just a cold, distant sentence that felt more like a dismissal than support. And the worst part is, I still replied, still thanked her for responding, still tried to keep the door open, because even after everything, I was still hoping that maybe she would show me some kind of care. A few days later I tried again. I called her, voice low, body weak, and I told her how things were progressing, how the side effects were getting worse, how the nights were getting longer, and she cut me off mid-sentence to say that she had a lot going on and didn't have the emotional space to deal with my negativity, and I think that was the moment I stopped expecting anything from her. She said I was being dramatic, that I was making it about me as usual, and that Mom and Dad were already stressed enough without me adding more to it, and I sat there with the phone still to my ear after the call ended, not because I wanted to call her back, but because I couldn't believe I had just been told by my own sister that my cancer was somehow a burden to the people who were supposed to love me. And in that silence, I realized I had never really had a sister. I had just had someone who shared my parents, someone who took all the light in the room and left me in the dark, and I finally stopped trying to reach out, because some people only show up when they need you, not when you need them. The more time passed, the more I realized that the loneliness wasn't just coming from my family, it was starting to creep into my marriage too, and I couldn't tell if I was just imagining it or if it was real, but something had shifted, something subtle at first, like the way she stopped asking how my appointments went, or how she started staying late at work more often, and I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that she was just stressed, that she was doing her best, but deep down I could feel her pulling away. We used to talk about everything, even the little things like what movie to watch or what we were craving for dinner, but now the silence between us stretched longer than the nights I spent tossing in bed from the chemo, and when I looked into her eyes, I didn't see worry or love. I saw someone who was already halfway out the door, someone who didn't know how to be with someone who was falling apart. I blamed myself, of course I did. I thought maybe I was being too negative, too tired, too needy, maybe I was draining her, maybe I had become the person she never signed up for, and so I stopped talking about the pain, I stopped mentioning the side effects, I stopped telling her I was scared, and I pretended I was okay because I didn't want to be the reason she left. But even when I stayed silent, she still grew more distant, and I started noticing the way she flinched when I touched her hand, the way she sighed when I asked if she wanted to stay in and watch something together, the way she rolled her eyes when I didn't have the energy to help around the house, and slowly it became clear that she wasn't just slipping away, she had already let go, and I was the only one still holding on. The worst part wasn't that my family ignored me, or that my sister dismissed me, or even that my wife was emotionally checked out. The worst part was that I was still trying to be strong for all of them, still trying to make it easier for everyone else, while I was the one fighting to stay alive. It happened one night when the pain wouldn't let me sleep and the silence in the room felt like it was swallowing me whole. The walls were closing in and my thoughts were louder than ever, echoing everything I had been trying to ignore, that I was alone, that no one really cared, that if I disappeared tomorrow the only difference it would make is one less person to bother them with updates they didn't want to hear. I got out of bed and walked into the bathroom, not because I needed anything, but because I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, pale skin, sunken eyes, hair thinning, body shaking, and I just stood there staring, wondering how the hell this had become my life, how I went from being invisible to being forgotten entirely. And I don't know what exactly triggered it. Maybe it was the silence, maybe it was the weight of everything pressing on my chest, but I broke, not in some dramatic screaming way, not by punching walls or collapsing to the floor. No, I broke quietly, the kind of breakdown that looks like someone standing still while everything inside them falls apart, and I just leaned on the sink, gripping it with white knuckles, trying to hold myself together even though I already knew I couldn't. I cried for the first time in months, and not the kind of crying that comes with sniffles or a few tears. I'm talking the kind where your chest caves in and your throat closes up and your whole body trembles like it's trying to let go of everything you've been carrying for too long. And I didn't even bother wiping my face, didn't try to pull myself together, because there was no one there to see me fall apart, and honestly, that made it easier. I sat down on the cold floor, back against the wall, knees pulled to my chest, and I whispered into the darkness that I was tired, not of fighting, but of fighting alone, tired of pretending, tired of hoping someone would notice, and for the first time, I let myself be weak without shame, and maybe that was the real beginning of whatever came next. The morning after that breakdown felt different, not easier and not lighter, just different, like something inside me had shifted even if nothing around me had. I still felt weak, I still felt exhausted, but for the first time in months I didn't feel like chasing anyone's attention, I didn't feel like proving anything to people who didn't care, and that silence that used to crush me started to feel like a kind of freedom. I didn't call my parents, I didn't text my sister, and I didn't wait for my wife to ask how I was feeling because I already knew she wouldn't. I made myself coffee, sat by the window, and watched the world move on without me, and for once I didn't feel the need to catch up with it. I just let it be, and I think maybe that was the first real moment of peace I'd had since the diagnosis. Something in me stopped waiting for validation, stopped hoping for apologies, stopped thinking that maybe if I explained things the right way they would suddenly see me, and I just let go of the version of them I had built in my head, the version where they were the kind of people who would fight for me, who would hold my hand through the worst of it, and instead I looked at who they really were and finally let the fantasy die. I started writing again, nothing special, just notes on my phone, half thoughts and memories and things I had never said out loud, and somehow putting it down made it easier to breathe, like I was giving my pain a place to exist outside of my body, and it didn't solve anything but it reminded me that I was still here, still capable of creating something even in the middle of everything falling apart. That day I didn't cry, I didn't wait, and I didn't pretend, I just existed in my own space without apologizing for it, and maybe that's what healing looks like when you're not doing it for anyone else. As the days went on I stopped checking my phone for messages that never came, and I stopped scrolling through people's lives that looked nothing like mine, and instead I started pouring whatever strength I had into small things that grounded me, because when your world feels like it's spinning out of control sometimes all you can do is hold on to whatever's still steady. I cleaned the apartment one drawer at a time, and it wasn't about tidying up, it was about feeling like I had control over something again. I started making breakfast even if I didn't have the appetite, because creating something with my hands reminded me that I was still alive, still moving, still capable of doing more than just surviving. The chemo was still brutal, my body still felt like it was at war with itself, and there were days I couldn't even get out of bed, but when I could I tried to do one thing that made me feel human, even if it was just washing my face or stepping outside for a minute to feel the wind. And it sounds stupid, but those moments started to matter more than anything anyone else could give me. I stopped asking why they didn't care and started asking why I still did, and the truth is I had been raised to believe that love meant sacrificing yourself, that being quiet meant being good, and that putting others first was the right thing to do. But now I was learning that you can give everything to people and still have them leave without looking back. So I started building something quietly, a life that wasn't about being seen or validated or chosen, a life that was mine no matter who ignored it, and maybe that wasn't much, but it was more than they ever gave me, and for now that was enough. It had been weeks since I heard from anyone in my family when out of nowhere I got a text from my mom, just a simple "Hey, how are you?" and for a second I just stared at the screen, not angry, not emotional, just empty, like I couldn't even find the energy to react to it, and maybe that was the clearest sign of how far gone we really were. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to hurt her but because I didn't have anything left to say, and I knew whatever I sent would be met with excuses or guilt or something that would try to make me feel bad for not playing the role they had written for me, the quiet son, the forgotten one, the backup plan. A few hours later she called. I let it ring, then ring again, and finally I answered just to hear what she would say. She told me she missed me, that she was sorry for not checking in more often, that she had been overwhelmed with everything going on, and that she hoped I was doing okay, and I just listened calmly without saying anything because I didn't believe any of it. When I finally spoke I told her I was fine, and I meant it, not because everything was okay but because I had learned to be okay without them. I told her I was doing what I had to do to take care of myself and that I didn't expect anything from anyone anymore, not even her, and the line went quiet for a while before she said that I was being cold and that she didn't understand why I was pushing her away. And I wanted to laugh, not out of cruelty but because the irony was so loud it was deafening. They pushed me away for years, made me feel invisible, made my pain feel inconvenient, and now that I had finally built a space where I didn't need them, they wanted to walk back in like nothing happened. I ended the call without saying goodbye, not out of anger but out of peace, because there was nothing left to fight for and nothing left to fix. It was just too little, too late. I stopped expecting closure from people who never gave me clarity. I stopped needing apologies from the same voices that stayed silent when I needed them the most. I realized that healing doesn't always come with a dramatic confrontation or a sudden moment of redemption. Sometimes it's just waking up one day and deciding not to carry the weight anymore. I never reached out again. I didn't call them. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't leave the door open for when they finally decided to care, because by the time they did I had already built something better, a life without waiting, without begging, without explaining myself over and over again to people who only saw me when it was convenient. I learned that family isn't about who shares your blood, it's about who shows up when your world falls apart, who listens when you have nothing left to give, who doesn't need reminders to care. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when it means walking away from everything you once tried so hard to fix. These days I still have good ones and bad ones, but the difference is now I face them on my terms, with my own strength, with no illusions about who will catch me if I fall, because I've already survived the fall and learned how to land without anyone there to break it. And if you're listening to this and you've ever felt like you were the invisible one, like you were screaming in a house full of people who couldn't hear you, just know this: you're not alone and you deserve better. Thank you for being here. If this story meant something to you, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps this channel grow and it tells the algorithm that stories like this matter.